Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at a new bundle that is entering the vault around goblins. So, let's get into it. Now, if you know anything about me and how I play paper magic, you'll know that my favorite tribe, my favorite thing, are goblins. I absolutely love goblins. Goblins are the Shazam. Love them. And so I'm really excited that this bundle has entered the game because I just like playing with goblins. Now, the 4 cards in the bundle are Tuktuk the Explorer. Tuktuk. I actually used this in my paper deck. Goblin Guide. Should be something very familiar to you paper players. Goblin Bushwhacker. And Quest for the Goblin Lord. So these 4 cards are going to come together in this Goblin bundle with the Bushwhacker, not the Bushwhacker, with Tuktuk being the prime mythic. Now, I should say early on, a quick thank you to Octagon for hooking me up with this bundle so that I could go ahead and make this video for you guys. So the mythic, Tuktuk the Explorer. Tuktuk is 8 mana for a 4/4 haste and berserker, and when this creature dies, your first goblin creature is going to get a permanent +X boost and defender and trample. Then it's also going to gain the artifact and golem subtypes. That X is going to be equal to the highest shield among supports on the board. The second card in the bundle is Goblin Guide. Goblin Guide is 6 for a 2/2. It's got Leader, which means Goblin, which means that any Goblin token that enters the battlefield will be exiled and immediately reinforce the Goblin Guide. And it has Haste and it has Bravery, so it's going to go into that first slot when it attacks. And it also has, when this creature attacks, shuffle the board, then destroy 3 gems, and each opponent's land support gains 1 shield. So what shuffle the board means is it just shuffles the configuration of the gems. It can't actually make a match for you, but then it can make a match for you when it then goes ahead and destroys the gems. The next card is Goblin Bushwhacker. That just reminds me of a Family Guy episode where... never mind. So Bushwhacker is 7 mana for a 3/3. It's got Kicker of 6. When it enters the battlefield, your creatures gain haste and menace until end of turn, and the Kicker 6 is going to make it so that your creatures get +X until end of turn, where X is equal to their reinforcements. That's any creature, any and all creatures. So Bushwhacker is really cool in a token deck because you get a bunch of tokens down and then you have Bushwhacker give your creatures a super big buff, which is nice. And then finally we've got Quest for the Goblin Lord, which is a support. It's 6 shields. It's 6 mana, it has 1 shield. And when a goblin creature enters the battlefield under your control, you reinforce the support. Each reinforcement is going to add 1 shield to it. As long as this support is reinforced 5 or more times, your goblin creatures get +4/+0, and as long as this support is reinforced 12 or more times, your goblin creatures get +4/+0 and gain double strike. Now, all these cards sort of are intended to go with each other, right? Because Tuktuk is going to hit something, it's probably going to die, it doesn't have a whole bunch of toughness. And then when it dies, it's going to buff up one of your critters, and that's going to be equal to a support with high shield counts. And Quest of the Goblin Lord is going to, or Quest for the Goblin Lord is going to be getting boosted shields for whenever Goblins comes into play. So the shield count for Quest for the Goblin Lord should go up, which means that Tuktuk should be buffing that. Goblin Guide is here to serve as a leader for goblins. So as you get goblin tokens, you're going to go ahead and put all of them into the Goblin Guide, which then is going to pair nicely with the Bushwhacker, who is going to go ahead and buff all your creatures based on your reinforcements, which is a fantastic pairing for leader. Now, with all of that in mind, there's all these things that are going to be going well together. You've got Tuktuk, and you've got Quest for the Goblin Lord, and then you've got Goblin Guide, and you've got Goblin Bushwhacker. But nonetheless, there's a number of areas where the bundle just sort of falls short in a few places, like a few sort of oversights with it. So the first one is with Goblin Guide and with Quest for the Goblin Lord. So because of the way that Leader works, when a goblin token enters the battlefield, it's exiled. It's just exiled and immediately reinforces the guide. But that means that for intents and purposes of creatures entering the battlefield, it does not count as a goblin creature entering the battlefield for Quest of the Goblin Lord. So if you have Goblin Guide out, and then you play Goblin tokens, and it reinforces the Goblin Guide, it doesn't actually reinforce Quest for the Goblin Lord, so it's not actually going to make it any easier for you to build up the supports reinforcements and get double strike to all of your goblins. Instead, you need to just actually manually cast all of your goblins, or you just have to not use the Goblin Guide, make your token separately, and then play your guide, or just don't use the guide at all, or something along those lines, right? So that was the first thing that really stood out to me here, was just because I tested it out and I was super stoked for that, and then they didn't work together. So that was the first piece. The second piece is in the card pool that we currently have available to us in Standard. So if we go to Standard, we type all of those in, and we type in Goblin token. So just cards that are going to produce Goblin tokens. We don't actually have a lot of cards that produce Goblin tokens. We actually have, I want to say, 4, right? So Goblin Goliath is going to create Goblin tokens. Pashalik Mons is going to go ahead and create Goblin tokens with a lost Goblin reinforcement. Goblin Wizardry is going to go ahead and make Goblin tokens. And then there's Dragon Fodder, which is, I think, from Origins, that's going to go ahead and make Goblin tokens. So Dragon Fodder, summons 2/1/1 goblins. They're actually tokens. It says goblins, but they're tokens. So we've got 4 different cards in Standard right now that are going to be able to make Goblin tokens. And of those 4 different cards that make Goblin tokens, the only ones that make like a bunch of tokens, right, like are just the big boy Goblin Goliath, right? This is the only like reliable way currently of making a bunch of Goblin tokens. Because Pashalik Mons, you have to lose reinforcements, and Goblin Wizardry sort of works, right? You get 3 tokens for 9 mana, so you could go ahead and use this one. But really your best bet is Goblin Goliath, and this is a masterpiece. Now, I have Goblin Goliath, and so as I have Goblin Goliath, I was able to get the most out of this bundle. But if you're a person who doesn't have Goblin Goliath, then you're not going to be able to get as much out of the bundle, because the strongest things that you can do in the bundle are going to be to use your Goblin Guide and your Goblin Bushwhacker together, and then to use something like Volrath or Gigantiform on the Goblin Guide, make the Goblin Guide absolutely crazy strong, and then kill your opponent and do all the laughing and giggles. Now, with that said, I absolutely love this. Like, I love everything about this because I have Goblin Goliath. The deck that I chose to go ahead and put all of these into was not that. It actually replaced my Quartzwood deck with a Samut, right? So the idea that I tried a number of different decks around this, and ultimately what I really wanted to get out of it was I wanted to play a Goblin Guide and have the Goblin Guide get as big as possible with as many Goblin Goliath things going into it, and then Gigantiform it. And make that Goblin Guide turn into a Goblin Scooter? I don't know, right? Like Goblin Scooter. And then have Goblin Scooter Guide just go in and like go to town on people. And because of the way that Samut works, it's going to go ahead and give Goblin Scooter Guide +2/+2 and double strike. So Goblin Scooter Guide is going to kill your opponent pretty fast. Now, for the rest of the deck was just intent on making it so that we can reliably get the Goliath and the Guide. And then in an ideal world, we get Goliath, we get the Guide, we get it all scooted up, and then we get to play some Bushwhackers and buff it up even more, right? So we've got Shatterskull Smashing for removal, we've got Turntimber Symbiosis for fetch, we've got Realms Uncharted to be able to fetch the Turntimber Symbiosis to be able to fetch whatever creature it is that we want. We've got Crag Crown Pathway because it's going to convert to both red and green. We've got Whirlwind of Thought for some card draw and to get loyalty. And we got Gigantiform to do wonderful, terrible things that are unspeakable and wonderful. And the Great Henge for, just more card draw and mana. So let's go ahead and take this bundle into a match so you guys can see how these cards work. Before we do that, you will notice that I am not using Quest of the Goblin Lord here, and I'm not using Tuktuk here. So if you're wondering, Althazar, why aren't you using Quest of the Goblin Lord and Tuktuk here in this gameplay? Well, For Quest of the Goblin Lord, like I mentioned, it doesn't actually gain the shields with the Goblin Guide, so you're kind of put in a position where you're using Guide or Goblin Lord. I chose Goblin Guide because Goblin Guide's awesome. Yeah, Goblin Guide's super awesome. Leader is awesome. Goblin Guide is awesome. Gigantiform Goblin Guide is awesome, and is way more awesome than the Quest for the Goblin Lord. Also, the Goblin Lord is going to give your goblins double strike, which the Goliath is going to do too. So yeah, that's where we're already getting the double strike. If you're wondering, well, then why not Tuktuk? Well, with this particular deck, I'm not really going to be getting a whole bunch of shields, so Tuktuk is not going to buff us up as much as Goblin Guide will with Gigantiform. So let's go ahead and get into the gameplay now for realsies. Alrighty, so for our opponent, we're going to be going up against Elhammerit's Archive. I've made so many videos where I've gone up against one of the Eldrazi that I just sort of wanted to have a little bit of a change of pace. So I decided to go up against Elhammerit's Archive. Now, turn one, getting Turn Timber Symbiosis is absolutely awesome. It means that we get to fetch any of the goblins of our choice. I'm actually going to go ahead and select the Guide, and I'm selecting the Guide over the Goliath because, as you saw, the Goliath was in the first position there, which means that I'm going to be drawing the Goliath much sooner than I would have naturally drawn the Guide. So that's why I did that. Now, getting that early Turn Timber means that we're going to be able to have green gem conversion and a greater green mana bonus, which we absolutely want. And then getting our Realms Uncharted means that we get to go ahead, get 2 more Turn Timbers, which means that we're definitely going to be able to go ahead and get our Goliaths now too. Now, unfortunately, the opponent plays Mizium Meddler. That meddling thing is without a doubt a pain in the butt, just because it means that my opponent's going to start draining mana from my hand. So it just slows the match down a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not too big of a deal. We've got all of our big play cards, so we've got all the things that we want at this stage in our hand. So we just need to be able to play them at this stage, right? So now here I'm just going to go ahead, look at my matches, see if there's a way I can get a double match. And there's indeed a double green match on the upper right. Getting the Bushwhacker there is fantastic because I definitely want to try and make the Bushwhacker happen. So I'm able to go ahead, get that double green. I'm able to go ahead and get a free Goliath with the Turn Timber, which you'll see is now going to reinforce my little goblin 5 times. So little goblin is going to start trying to get as scary as it can get. You know, like, I mean, it's a goblin, so you have to question, like, how scary can the goblin actually get? But it's doing its best. The opponent plays the Sphinx of let's stall the game even more by making your mana costs go up. Kudos, Sphinx. But that's okay. I have a bunch of green gem conversion coming up because of my lands and because of Realms Uncharted. I can go ahead and kick it, which is fine. Getting the Shatter Skull here is really nice, actually, because I can actually get another land out of this, and in moving the Shatter Skull smashing up in my hand, I'm actually able to start trying to remove my opponent's cards. So I'm able to start just getting rid of their creatures. They've got 3 critters, and I definitely want to go ahead and get rid of them. Now, sadly, I don't have any matches in my colors there, so the Goblin Guide is going to go ahead and shift up the game board a little bit. And then in shifting up the game board, the Mizium Meddler is getting the sword, which is going to destroy my activated gem. But it doesn't give them more matches. So I'm not losing more mana, which is really nice. And now here, I've actually got a pretty sweet match. So I'm going to go ahead and move the Shatter Skull Smashing up for sure. I do want the Shatter Skull Smashing to go off this turn. And if I actually take that bottom loyalty match, I'm going to go ahead and make a bunch of cascades right there. So there's a bunch of cascades going off. I've got a ton of mana. I can use the Turn Timber Symbiosis to get another Goblin Goliath, which is going to get me more Goblin tokens, which we obviously want for, many reasons. We just pulled Gigantiform. Yes, that's the last piece of the puzzle that we needed, guys. So we got Gigantiform. That means that we can go big. We can now go ahead and make the Goblin Guide have a base power toughness of 8/8 instead of a base power toughness of 2/2. We're definitely going to go ahead and kick that. We're going to wipe our opponent's field. Except, we don't get the Meddler out, but that's okay. We don't need that. We've got another Goliath that we can play, though. We're definitely going to want to do that. We want to go ahead and charge up the Gigantiform also. Charging up Gigantiform would be a pretty big win for us. So Let's see. I've got the white. I got the blue into green there, which is going to be good mana. We're going to go ahead and reinforce our little goblin now 5 times. Unfortunately, the Shatter Skull doesn't apply until the start of the turn, so it's not actually going to give me the increased mana bonus right there. And I lucked out for sure here because Alhammerus did not take that 5 match. But I mean, I say I lucked out, but then they get like, one of those cascades that only Greg gets. I say as I get a bunch of cascades, but you know how it is. So the Goliath is going to now go ahead and give our little goblin double strike. It's pretty obvious that this is going to be the end of the match, but nonetheless, we're going to try and make this as nasty as possible. So looking at the board, we're going to want to go ahead and buff up our little goblin even more. Why not? Let's give it an extra 2 power. Let's go ahead and... Oh, we're not going to be able to get off 2 bushwhackers. Oh well, but we will be able to gigantiform this thing. Look at this thing. This little goblin's got 150... 180 power or something after this, or something silly. 169, and we're gonna swing for the kill, and that's gonna be the match. Our little goblin's gonna go whap whap. Go Goblin Ranger, whap whap. Game over. So for my final thoughts on the bundle, it is continuing the trend for the Zendikar Rising bundles in that the rares are way better than the mythic. So in the first bundle, the Moldiah Channelers bundle, it came with the Moldiah Channelers, it came with Gigantiform, which you saw in the video, and it came with Realms Uncharted, which you also saw in the video. And as I'm going to be posting in a later video, I happen to think that Realms Uncharted is one of the best cards in Standard right now. It's an incredible card. But nonetheless, those 2 rares were definitely, without a doubt, the best cards in that bundle. And the same is going to be true for this one. So Goblin Bushwhacker and Goblin Guide stand out as very good cards. Whereas both Quest for the Goblin Lord and Tuktuk the Explorer are more mediocre. So for you, if this bundle is worth it for you, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have Goblin Goliath. So if you have Goblin Goliath, then you can have a heck of a lot of fun with this bundle, because you can use Goblin Goliath with the guide and do some pretty nasty things. You can put them in Koth for like super reinforcements. If you don't have access to something like Gigantiform or Full Wrath, you can go ahead and throw the Bushwhacker in there too and just have a bunch of Goblin Love fun, which is always great. I love goblins. They make funny little popping sounds when they die. So there's just so many good reasons to play with goblins. Like, I can think of everything flavor text from goblins. The lizard fancied it. The goblin fancied himself a rider. The lizard fancied itself a new flail. For like Goblin Rider or something, or Lizard Rider or whatever from, I think, the original Zendikar set. So there's so much fun stuff with goblins, and this bundle is exactly that. It's fun. You've got the Bushwhacker, you've got the Guide. Those are both very fun. But whether or not you want to get the bundle is ultimately going to come down to, do you have Goblin Goliath, and do you want to have fun with goblins with Goblin Goliath and the Guide and the Bushwhacker? So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.